What's the one-sentence pitch for the Spiritborn?
This is the martial arts class that's power is infused with the spirits.
Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and last week I got to try out Diablo 4's newest class, the Spiritborn, which will release with the expansion Vessel of Hatred on October 8th. In this video, I'll tell you all about the Spiritborn. And what you're seeing is my gameplay footage from the Spiritborn inside part of the new region, the jungles of Nahantu. And we'll also check out some cool new strongholds within. I also got to interview Vessel of Hatred game director Brent Gibson and game designer Bjorn Mikkelsen. I'll post that interview tomorrow in a separate video because this video is running long and that one's a half hour just by itself. Basically last week, Blizzard invited a ton of creators from around the world to try out the Spiritborn. And in this video, I'll cover my experience playing the class, my impressions and thoughts, and give you an overview of what the Spiritborn is all about. But before we go into that deep dive, I just want to remind you folks that you can find all of my Diablo 4 coverage on my website, Rhykker.com. Which also takes us to a word from this video's sponsor, Squarespace. I built my website using Squarespace, and I was able to do everything myself, quickly and easily, and with zero education in the field. All thanks to how easy Squarespace is to work with. Squarespace even has a new AI tool called Squarespace Blueprint to make setting up a website easier than ever, uniquely tailored to your brand or business, and optimized for viewing on every device. It even has optimized SEO tools so that you can launch your website and start getting views as quickly as possible. Squarespace is flexible for any kind of website, with tons of design options to pick from. You can easily connect all your social accounts and also upload your video content and organize your video library. You can sell products or services and offer flexible payment options, including buy now and pay later plans with Afterpay and ClearPay. Basically, if you want to build a website, I recommend Squarespace. So head to squarespace.com/Rhykker or click the link in the description to start your free trial and use code Rhykker to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/RHYKKER and use code Rhykker. So, high level, what is the Spiritborn? How does it play? Well, take Diablo 3's monk, take away its auras, strip away the monk flavor, and replace that with the flavor of an Aztec warrior. And instead of being empowered by the light, by holy forces like the monk, you're instead empowered by guardian spirits of the jungle. So if you like playing monk, you're gonna love playing the Spiritborn, because that's exactly the gameplay archetype being fulfilled. Fast-hitting, agile, melee warrior. We were previously speculating that the Spiritborn would be a cross of the monk, the witch doctor, maybe even some Amazon, and in my play experience, it's more like a monk with a little bit of witch doctor flavor to it. There's no shield gameplay at all, as some speculated. There's no javelin gameplay. You're not wearing medium armor. I know some people speculated about that. In fact, the Spiritborn is probably the most lightly armored class by the lore and visual design. The thing about the Spiritborn that differentiates it the most from the monk, however, is how you build it. All of its mechanics revolve around these 4 spirit guardians, which are each meant to represent different styles of martial arts. One is more defensive, one is more aggressive, stuff like that. And the devs really wanted to make the Spiritborn the most customizable class, where you can mix and match different Spirit Guardian combos to really personalize your Spiritborn. Now, if you'll permit me a moment of indulgence, one minor criticism that I had about the Spiritborn before I played it was just the name Spiritborn. Historically, most Diablo classes have a name that instantly tells you what the class is. Barbarian, Rogue, Sorceress, Paladin, Necromancer, Druid. You hear these names and you instantly have a good idea of what the flavor of the class is and what kind of gameplay it'll deliver. This is incredibly important for new players to be onboarded. Now, some of these classes also have lore-friendly names. Necromancers, for instance. Their real name is Priests of Rathma. Only outsiders call them Necromancers. But you can't call the class Priest of Rathma, because then a new player is going to think, oh, a priest, well, I don't want to be a healer, I'm going to pass on that. So I didn't like the name Spiritborn because it doesn't really tell you anything. I had suggested either the name Shaman, if it's about summoning spirits, or Jaguar Warrior, if it's leaning more into the Aztec Jungle Warrior thing. Well, now that I've actually played the Spiritborn, I now understand that there just is no precedent for this class. There's no familiar name that you can give the Spiritborn. It really is unlike anything else. Calling it a martial artist or a shaman just would not correctly convey the unique mixture of gameplay and flavor that is the Spiritborn. These are warriors from Nahantu that received a special calling to protect the land. You see, in Diablo lore, you have the High Heavens, you have the Burning Hells, and you have Sanctuary. But then you also have the Spirit Realm, aka the Realm of the Dead, aka the Unformed Land. If you play Dungeons & Dragons, this is a bit like the Shadowfell, or the Ethereal Plane. It's another plane of existence that is a ghostly reflection of the mortal world, and it's separated from our world by a veil. And the Spirit Realm is where spirits go when humans die. Necromancers tap into the Spirit Realm, as do the witch doctors of the Taganze region of Nahantu. The crossing into the Spirit Realm exists within Nahantu, and angels and demons don't know about the existence of this Spirit Realm. The Spiritborn are tasked with protecting this crossing. So they didn't get involved in the events of Diablo 4 until now because Lilith and her shenanigans, well, they were happening further north, and the Spiritborn didn't want to draw any attention to Nahantu, especially given the region's history with Mephisto. Remember, in Diablo 2, when we go fight Mephisto in Act 3, that's canonically now considered inside the jungles of Nahantu. So they already had a close call then, they don't want to test their luck. But now that Narelle is bringing Mephisto and his Soul Stone right into Nahantu, well, it's time for the Spiritborn to get involved. Because this time, it's personal. And something that I didn't anticipate, especially given my petty gripe with the name Spiritborn, I actually really like the flavor and the lore of this class. You know, I've been a fan of Diablo for 25 years. I have a lot of nostalgic love for all the old classes. It's tough for me to see a new class and accept it as a new part of Diablo lore. But I think the devs really did an excellent job of making the Spiritborn feel like a core part of Diablo's lore. I think making a class that is intrinsically tied to the area that we're exploring in the expansion really helps anchor it within the world. I think a part of the failing of the Witch Doctor, and I'm sorry to any Witch Doctor fans, but by every metric that I'm aware of, it was the least popular class in Diablo 3. I think the issue with the Witch Doctor is that it just felt so out of place in D3. Sure, we went to jungles in Diablo 2, but we never met any Witch Doctor NPCs, apart from those little fetish shamans, but those don't count. In a world of gothic fantasy, goofy jungle man just stood out like a sore thumb. But the way they're introducing the Spiritborn, it's like they found a way to say, yes, this is a new class in the lore, and this is it in its natural habitat, and this is how it all fits in with the world and is all part of the ongoing story. And it just feels so fleshed out in a way that the inclusion of the Spiritborn adds to the richness of Diablo's lore instead of feeling like a new puzzle piece that we have to somehow jam in to kinda, sorta make it fit into Diablo. At this point, from a flavor perspective, I actually prefer the Spiritborn to the Monk. I think the Spiritborn better fits Diablo's world and lore. Or at least they've made it feel that way thanks to how they've introduced this class. Oh, and just my speculation here, I don't think we're gonna get a Monk now, because mechanically it would overlap way too much with the Spiritborn. However, no class has auras yet. The Monk had auras. So I think next class is going to be a shield bearer with auras, two archetypes we haven't covered yet. So whether that's going to be the Paladin or whatever Paladin analog D4 is going to see, I think that's, well, I know that's something that a lot of players have been waiting for and hoping for, and I suspect that's next. So within the Spirit Realm exist these guardian spirits, and mechanically we focus on 4 of these: the Jaguar, the Gorilla, the Eagle, and the Centipede. And that's another reason why we couldn't call the class the Jaguar Warrior, because Jaguar is coincidentally one of the 4 spirits. For those who don't know, sorry, ancient Aztec warriors, there was the Jaguar Warrior, the Eagle Warrior. These are sort of like different, it was like the Marine Corps of the ancient Aztec. So they sort of captured that same feel, but put it within these guardian spirits. And again, mechanically, we're focusing on 4. Theoretically, in the lore, there might be more guardian spirits they've alluded to, but all your class mechanics are built around these 4 spirits. And every skill is tied to at least one of these spirits. And this is also the case with the class mechanic, the Spirit Hall. Very intrinsically tied to these guardian spirits, and we'll talk more about the Spirit Hall later. So, Jaguar skills, they're all about hitting fast and furiously. Guerrilla skills are mostly about being an unstoppable tank, and it also has support for Thorns builds. Eagle skills are largely about mobility, and they also grant the Spiritborn some minor ranged attack capabilities. And then the Centipede is all about poison, damage over time, and healing. Yes, healing. Because apparently Centipede in some cultural lore is about kind of a balance in nature. And skills could also be tagged with more than one Spirit Guardian. For instance, a skill that makes you dash a short distance and apply a poison dot, that would be a Centipede and Eagle skill. Now, each of the Spiritborn's 4 generator skills operates like the monk generators from Diablo 3. It's all about 3-hit combos. There's also, I guess, some precedent there for Diablo 2 assassin combos. So your first 2 attacks with the generator do effect A, and then the 3rd hit does effect B, which is generally more powerful. In fact, the Spiritborn even has a skill called Vortex, which is remarkably similar to the monk's Cyclone Strike, which pulls in enemies around you. And while the Spiritborn lacks the monk's auras, I actually realized, going over the skills again, that it sorta kinda does have auras as well. Some active skills have a passive effect that you get just from having the skill on your skill bar, in addition to their active effect, of course. This is a new skill functionality. I can't think of any other Diablo skill that does this, just that it gives you a passive effect while it's on your skill bar, because it's effectively just a single person aura. The monks call them mantras, technically not auras, but functionally auras. Oh, and while there is mechanically a lot of monk influence, I also caught one skill that seems very much like the Diablo 3 Crusader's Falling Sword skill. It's called Soar. It's an eagle skill that yeets you up into the air and then back down at a target destination, applying ground effects where you land. Overall, though, the Spiritborn's skills and kit focus a lot on mobility, with buffs that encourage you to move fast, and they build synergy off of move speed as well. There's a lot of vulnerable synergy, crit synergy, Thorns capability. I can see full-on Thorns builds here. There's a lot of cooldown reset and reduction, and skills with multiple stacks as well, as in, here's a skill that has a cooldown, but you can build up like 3 uses of the skill, and then pop, boom, 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 3 in quick succession. I think the Spiritborn has this more than any other class. Case in point, when I was playing an Eagle-focused build, 4 of my 6 skills had multiple charges. The 5th one was a generator, and the 6th one was a spender. While the Spiritborn has a lot of hooks for vulnerable and crit, there seems to be no overpower builds that you can make with a Spiritborn, and you also don't see Fortify in its defensive toolkit. Instead, we see a lot of barrier, dodge, even block chance and block damage reduction, heals, as well as lifesteal. The Spiritborn also introduces a number of new mechanics. You have Resolve, first off. Resolve is something where you can have up to 8 stacks of Resolve, and every time you take damage, you lose 1 stack. And as long as you have any number of stacks, you have 20% damage reduction. That doesn't stack. It's whether you have 1 stack or you have 2 or 3, it's always 20% damage reduction. And you see this a lot with guerrilla skills. Then there's Unhindered, which is almost like a weaker version of Unstoppable. When you are unhindered, you can move through enemies, and your movement speed cannot be reduced. You tend to see this a lot with the Eagle spirit. Then there's Ferocity. Ferocity is a buff that increases your attack speed by 5% per stack, and can stack up to 4 times for a 20% attack speed buff, and it lasts 4 seconds. Again, you're probably thinking of some familiar Diablo 3 mechanics there. And as you can guess, you see Ferocity a lot with Jaguar skills. The Centipede doesn't seem to have any new mechanic per se, but it does have the ability to apply dots and spread that dot damage around to other enemies, which is an incredibly powerful effect. And there's some gameplay there reminiscent of the Witch Doctor's Locust Swarm, with the item that makes your Locust Swarm jump to other enemies. Now, every Spirit Guardian also has an ultimate, and the Spiritborn ults and their supporting passives feel like the most useful and well-designed ults in the game. Unlike most existing builds with most of the classes, I actually used all of the Spiritborn ults and found them useful. For the gorilla, you summon him and he deals continuous damage in an area, and as long as you're in that area, he's giving you barrier, he's giving you damage reduction, unstoppable, and in that area, he also slows enemy missiles. For the eagle, you summon him, he swoops in with one attack that knocks down enemies in an area, makes them vulnerable, and then after a short delay, he takes off with a second really high damage attack that is guaranteed to crit. The Jaguar ult is kind of like the Monk's 7-sided strike. The Jaguar bounces around, hitting enemies, while also buffing your attack speed, and for every enemy that you kill while the Jaguar is doing its thing, you have a 15% chance to instantly reset your ult's cooldown, and you cause your next cast of the ult within 8 seconds to repeat its same 7-sided strike an extra time. It's this crazy high-speed ult spamming gameplay as long as you're fighting a high density of enemies. Really cool. Then the Centipede ult comes out like this giant Hydra and shoots at enemies, applying dots. It even executes non-boss enemies that become poisoned, and it spreads some damage around after it does that. Execution powers are so super strong, especially when you're pushing high-tier content. I don't know how they're going to actually balance this because it's going to be insane in pits. Then to further incentivize the use of ults, they have a suite of generic passive skills that can buff your ults. Some will give you passive bonuses just for having an ult on your skill bar. Some are going to give you buffs for using your ult or killing enemies with your ult. Some will heal you whenever your ult hits enemies. Some will give you free casts of other skills when you use your ult. The devs just clearly really want ults to be viable. Then the Spiritborn's key passives seem crazy strong as well. One gives huge buffs to vulnerable builds. Another gives massive buffs to each Guardian Spirit and synergy for using at least 2 spirits. A third creates synergy between the 3-hit generator combos and reducing cooldowns and buffing skill ranks even. And the fourth makes it such that whenever you crit an enemy, you spread poisoning damage to all enemies around your target. So now let's talk about the Spirit Hall. That's the Spiritborn's class mechanic. It's superficially similar to the Druid where you pick an animal spirit to align with, but better. The Spirit Hall unlocks at level 15. You get a quest in Jiakul, and that's going to send you to Nahantu. Inside the Spirit Hall interface in your UI, you must select one major spirit power and one minor spirit power. You can mix and match any combination of the 4 spirit guardians here. You could major and minor in Jaguar, for instance, or if you want, you can major in Centipede and minor in Gorilla, whatever combination you want. For whatever you choose as your primary spirit, all of your skills will now be considered tagged with the primary spirit, allowing for whatever synergies you can think up. And then you additionally get specific powers based on the spirit. The Jaguar makes you unleash a flurry of blows on enemies. The Eagle makes it such that whenever you evade, you launch lightning feathers at enemies, damaging them and making them vulnerable. The Gorilla deals thorns damage and grants barrier whenever you hit an enemy with a Gorilla skill. This allows for pure thorns builds right there. And the Centipede slows enemies and nerfs their damage. Honestly, this felt like the least exciting Spirit Hall primary, but there's probably synergies here that you can build with crowd controlling enemies. So that's the primaries, and you also select a secondary. The Jaguar secondary lets you build more ferocity, so more attack speed. The Eagle rewards movement with crit chance. The Gorilla gives you more resolve stacks and unstoppable while you have resolve. And the Centipede gives you healing for poisoning enemies. So altogether, while you can certainly take all Jaguar skills and major Jaguar and minor Jaguar and just be the ultimate Jaguar, there's also tons of opportunity for mixing and matching the various Guardians in different ways to create crazy combos, like mixing Gorilla and Centipede to become this unkillable tank that can heal through anything. This really does feel like the most customizable class in the game yet. Now, the Spiritborn's kit seems incredibly powerful, and I think that's because the Spiritborn has one fewer itemization slot than most other classes. So Barbarian has the most slots, right? Because you have 2 two-handers and 2 one-handers. Then the Rogue has the next most, where it gets 1 two-hander and 2 one-handers. Then the Sorcerer, Druid, and Necromancer, they all have the same number, where technically you can have either a one-hander and an offhand, or you can wield a two-hander and give up 1 itemization slot. Well, the Spiritborn can only use two-handers. there's no option for the Spiritborn for using a one hand and an offhand. That means you will never be able to stack as many legendary affixes or tempers as other classes. But the devs aren't worried about this making the Spiritborn weaker. They made sure that the Spirit Hall was scalable. There's going to be like unique items and aspects that are going to power up the Spirit Hall in order to account for them having one fewer item slot. So altogether, I got to try out 4 different pre-made builds on the Spiritborn, all at level 30. Each build focused on one Spirit Guardian, but still generally doing quite a bit of mix and matching. I first tried the Eagle build, which felt like a really cool kit. I had so many charges on my skills, I felt like I can spam them pretty much nonstop. I had mobility. I had these ranged attacks shooting out and boomeranging around. It all felt really cool, but I felt weak. Like I was basically hitting my enemies with a sack of feathers. I don't know if I just didn't get the synergy of the skills and gameplay down. Next, I tried the Gorilla, who felt incredibly tanky and significantly more powerful damage-wise than the Eagle. This felt like the ultimate tank, like I could just not be killed. And the kit was less complicated than the Eagle build, and it just felt like a really strong beginner-friendly option. Next, I tried the Jaguar. I immediately felt much squishier than the tanky Gorilla, but man, were my attacks fast, I did lots of damage, and the kit just felt really good overall. At this point, Jaguar was my favorite of the 3. Gorilla was my second favorite. But then I tried the Centipede, and that was basically just turning on cheat codes. Something's off with the balance of the Centipede. It felt crazy overpowered, dealing insane damage by applying dots and propagating them around to other enemies and executing them and just deleting monsters, all while also having strong sustain by healing myself. It was just total easy mode. Now, all that said, again, this was at level 30. A lot of us played the D4 beta pre-release, and we know that things that are strong at level 30 are not necessarily going to be strong at level 100. Also, this isn't final game balance. They still have months to keep balancing. They're going to do more tuning passes to bring these builds more in line with each other, and they're taking our feedback into account as well. So it doesn't really matter that one was more powerful and one was weaker. What's important to recognize here is that I got 4 distinct gameplay experiences out of one class. Some appeal to me more than others, but I think that means that there's just a good chance for people to find a playstyle within the Spiritborn that they'll enjoy. Now, outside of the new class, we got to explore a little bit of the jungles of Nahantu. Not a whole lot, because the demo was really about trying the Spiritborn, so we didn't get to see any new events or season mechanics or new systems, and nothing like that. But there were 2 new Strongholds in the region that we played in. Strongholds continue to be one of the strongest parts of Diablo 4's dungeon designs, but one in particular really stood out because it involved new mechanics, playing upon an old Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 feature, light and darkness. You enter the Stronghold, and it's this dungeon, and you are rapidly plunged into darkness. Your minimap is useless. Now, your attacks may emanate a bit of light, but really what you want to do is grab this light source, this kind of like a lantern thing, let's call it, and you carry it around with you to navigate. And only one person in your party can have that light source in hand. There's just one of them. So you gotta find your way through this maze of darkness, coordinating with your teammates. And also you cannot fight while holding the lantern, so you gotta set it down. There's also some key places where you can kind of plug the lantern into some magical thingy that gets it to float along. So then you're going to want to basically escort. It's almost like an escort quest where you're following this floating light as it goes to the next checkpoint. It was really cool. I could imagine this would be annoying to do over and over and over 100 times, but Strongholds are not farmable experiences, so for a one-time dungeon, I thought it was creative, it was cool. Outside of that, while partied up and playing with my BFF DM, we noticed some music that felt distinctly like a Diablo 2 throwback. And the devs did confirm that there's a lot of nostalgia and fan service built into the expansion. So overall, I'm pretty hyped for the Spiritborn. I would say that I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoy highly mobile classes. I'm actually a bit concerned that the Spiritborn will overshadow Melee Rogue. They just seem to have so many more tools in their kit that I may end up dropping Melee Rogue for Spiritborn. Right now, Spiritborn ranks high up there in the classes that I'd want to main. I would definitely take it over the Druid, Sorcerer, or Necro. I would possibly prefer it to the Rogue, which breaks my heart a bit because I do have a soft spot for the Rogue. And as long as the Barbarian is not the best broken OP class once again, then I would also pick the Spiritborn over the Barbarian. It's just so clear that the Spiritborn had more time to cook than the other classes, and its design was informed by the live game over the past year. It addresses some weaknesses we see in the design of the other classes, and it almost makes me want to see the other classes get a design overhaul to become on par with the Spiritborn. Now, all that said, again, big disclaimer, I was playing a level 30 character. It's difficult to anticipate what things will look like at level 100 with full Paragon boards and everything, but I look forward to finding out. And that's going to wrap up this video. But do stay tuned for tomorrow. I'll be posting my interview with game director Brent Gibson and game designer Bjorn Mikkelsen. In the meantime, leave a comment with your thoughts on the Spiritborn. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my supporters. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.